All right, today we're tackling one of the most pivotal moments in all of Christian history, the Council of Nicaea, back in 325 AD. Now, this is usually held up as this amazing moment of unity, right? The moment the church all came together and finally declared its core beliefs for all time. But what if that big universal consensus wasn't nearly as universal as we've all been led to believe?
So let's just get right to the heart of it. The source material we're digging into today asks a pretty bold question. Was the creed that came out of Nicaea a product of pure divine guidance, or was it maybe shaped or even pushed by the political agenda of the Roman emperor, Constantine? That's what we're here to do. We're going to investigate the evidence presented piece by piece. Okay, so first up, let's put the council itself right under the microscope. See, Nicaea is called an ecumenical council. That's a fancy word that's supposed to mean universal, like representing the entire church. But the source material we're looking at throws a flag on that play right from the start.
So what's the first clue in our investigation? Well, it's just a number, 15%. That's it. So what does this represent? According to historical estimates cited in our source, this was roughly the percentage of all Christian bishops in the world who actually showed up to the council. Just 15%.
And this chart just lays it all out, doesn't it? You see the 318 or so bishops who are there, and then you see the estimated total, which could have been as high as 2,000 across the empire. This leads the source to ask a really tough question. If a whopping 85% of church leadership wasn't even in the room, how can we really say the decision was universal? So how did this happen?
Well, the source suggests an answer it calls the imperial filter.
See, Emperor Constantine didn't just invite the bishops, he basically commanded them to come, and he paid for their travel with state funds. This naturally created a kind of selection bias. The bishops who were already on board with the emperor's goal, political unity, were way more likely to make the trip. So the source argues the attendees weren't a random sample of the whole church, but a group that was already leaning the emperor's way.
And if you're looking for a smoking gun, well, the source material points right here. This is a quote from Eusebius of Caesarea, a hugely important bishop who was actually at the council. He later admitted in a letter back home that he thought the key theological term, homoousios, was problematic, but he signed the creed anyway. Why? Because the emperor himself, who, by the way, wasn't even baptized at the time, was pushing hard for it. That really makes you wonder how much of the consensus was real conviction and how much was just political pressure.
Okay, so that's the council itself. But our investigation doesn't end there. Because if the Nicene Creed was really so solid, so universally accepted, you'd expect it to stick around, right? Well, the decades that followed tell a very different story. Whoa! Now just take a look at this comparison. This is pretty striking. Only 34 years after Nicaea, another massive council was held at Ariminum. And look at the attendance, over 400 bishops. That's significantly more than Nicaea. And their decision? They officially rejected Nicaea's core formula of homoousios. This creates this huge paradox, right? If the authority of a council is what matters, shouldn't the bigger council's decision carry more weight? And this timeline, man, it just paints a picture of total chaos. You have an affirmation, then a rejection by an even larger group, and then something else happens entirely. The debate wasn't settled by another big meeting or more theological arguments.
It was settled by the state. In the year 380, Emperor Theodosius basically dropped the hammer. He issued a decree that made non-Nicene Christianity illegal. So, according to the source, the Nicene tradition didn't win the day through persuasion. It was ultimately enforced by the sword of the Roman Empire. Theological disagreement literally became a crime.
This all brings us to the real heart of the dispute. What were they even fighting about? What was so controversial? The source material boils it all down to two fundamentally different ways of thinking about Christ's divinity. One comes from Greek philosophy, and the other comes from a Hebrew legal concept.
First, you have that famous Nicene term, homoousios. Now, this isn't a term you'll find in the Bible. It's a concept borrowed straight from Greek philosophy. It means that the Father and the Son shared the exact same substance or essence. It's a way of describing divinity as a matter of what something is.
But there was another way of looking at it, and it comes from a totally different world, the Hebrew legal principle of shaluach. In this model, an appointed agent, a shaluach, is considered as himself. This means they carry the full, complete authority of the person who sent them. So here, divinity is all about delegated authority and status, not metaphysical stuff or substance. And to make this crystal clear, the source gives us this fantastic analogy. Imagine a king pressing his signet ring into hot wax to seal a decree. That wax seal now carries the exact image and the full authority of the ring. It perfectly represents the king. But here's the kicker. Nobody would ever claim the wax is made of the same substance as the gold ring, right? That's how the Shaluach principle views Christ's divinity, a perfect representation of the Father's authority without having to be the exact same substance.
So, when you put it all together, what our investigation really uncovers are two totally competing models, two completely different systems of authority. Let's just summarize these two models side by side.
This chart just lays it all out. In the Nicene view, the final authority is church councils and bishops. In what the source calls the monarchist or Shaluach view, the final authority is the scriptural text itself. One Christology is about a shared essence, the other is about shared authority. And when you look at history, one model the source claims was eventually enforced by the Roman state. It's a clear side-by-side verdict of our investigation.
And all of this brings us to one final, really challenging question that the source material leaves us with. If over 400 bishops at a larger, later council could just completely abandon Nicaea's key formula, what does that really say about the idea of an infallible church council? It's a question that strikes right at the heart of how we understand authority, leaving us to think about that complex mix of faith, politics, and power that shaped history.